We wouldn't want that 20 years down the line, we have an entire population of young children, young adults, old, suffering from various health effects due to our negligence, our inaction, or our ignorance. ये उन्होंने तब कहा था.
Radiation from cell towers, which have been mushrooming up in our city, on top of residential buildings, near schools, on top of hospitals. The cause that I have been involved with and I would like to spread awareness about is the harm that this can do to our health. 14 mobile cell towers came up almost overnight. We wrote to the Chief Minister once, twice. They did reply, but they told us to address our concern to Mantralay. We put up banners outside our building requesting the Chief Minister to take notice. The press all came, they all wanted to know what it was about, and literally within 2 weeks all the towers went. This is happening not just in Mumbai in front of my house, it's happening opposite practically everybody's house.
It is going to affect everybody, the men and the women, the children and the old, the rich and the poor, the people in the city and the people in the villages. And not just all of us. This radiation, which was not there 15, 20 years ago, is going to also affect our environment, our birds, our bees, our flowers, our farming.
Why is no one telling young people that we could be at risk for serious health and reproductive problems? I'm here today to say my generation has a right to know. We must know the truth about the risks we are facing with cell towers, routers, and multiple devices around us all day and night.
In a child, the skull is thinner, the scalp is thinner, so the amount of energy going into a child's skull is much greater than in an adult. So you have to be very cautious when you're looking at, children using these cell phones. That could be a very serious issue.
And that's increasing. Yeah, more and more kids are getting cell phones, and
right.
it's sort of normal for them.
Guys, I know you were worried about hot tubs and Speedos, but a recent study says that Wi-Fi may be nuking your sperm. A recent study took sperm samples from 29 fertile men. They placed a petri dish of sperm under laptops with Wi-Fi turned off and Wi-Fi turned on. What they found was pretty shocking. Sperm exposed to Wi-Fi-enabled laptops were lazier, less concentrated, and had more DNA damage than their unexposed brothers. But still, early days, and more research needs to be done. Now, while low-level radiation still hasn't been proven to hurt human beings, it may have an effect on our much smaller and possibly more sensitive friends.
Everyone wants 5G, faster internet, right? Downloads will improve and you'll get better cell service, but it means more of these cell phone towers. They will appear every 12 homes in neighborhoods, and some in the western suburbs aren't on board because they question the health risks. CBS 2's Jermont Terry is live in Hinsdale with the push to stop 5G. Jermont.
Erica, this wooden stick right here is just the beginning of the 5G rollout. Now, if the companies get their way, instead of a stick, there will be a cell tower here. But this tower will not be 20 or 30 feet high. And that has some people in this neighborhood saying there's a bigger price to pay for 5G.
So 5G.
Meet three Hinsdale moms. Paige.
It's very alarming.
Christine.
We need everyone to take a stand.
And Farhara.
This could be really bad.
The trio's on a mission to stop 5G from coming into town.
It is not just Hinsdale.
Western Springs, Naperville, and Schaumburg.
A few months back, these wooden sticks popped up in yards throughout the western suburbs.
That was placed here by Verizon as a proposed site for a 5G transmitter.
Wireless companies insist 5G is expected to be 100 times faster than current speeds. But in order for the bands to travel, more transmitters are needed in closer proximity. The signal will be carried on new, smaller towers that can fit on light poles like these.
We are not against technology.
But the Stop 5G group questions just how safe all these smaller towers will be for those who walk and live here.
But before we become sort of the canary that is subjected to all of this, we want to
actually had that data on safety be proven.
Many of the towers are expected to be near schools.
Bone marrow of a child absorbs 10 times the radiation of an adult.
The company's pushing 5G, insisting what the towers will transmit is safe, but there's no concrete testing leaning for or against it. And until then, the Stop 5G group believes the project should halt. Flyers are popping up. These concerned moms expect hundreds to attend a town hall on Wednesday.
And we want people to just be educated on what 5G is, what they can do about it.
Now, besides the potential health hazard, people are also concerned about the fact that these towers will simply sit in their front yards, and that potentially will bring down their property values. As I pointed out, there will be a town hall meeting on this Wednesday. A huge crowd is expected, and we have all the information located at cbschicago.com. For now, reporting live in Hinsdale, Jermont Terry, CBS 2 News. Erica?
Thank you, Jermont.
The second side of that is the health issues. There are some individuals that have raised health concerns on 5G deployment radiation. How are you getting information out on both of those to make sure we're not making ourselves vulnerable to economic espionage, and we're also being attentive on any health concerns that individuals may have?
Thank you, Senator. With respect to the second issue, which I'll tackle first, we are not the health experts when it comes to these issues. We've consulted, of course, with the Federal Food and Drug Administration and with others who are responsible for determining what those standards should be. And we are confident that our standards are ones that are healthy for consumers.
So a growing number of prominent doctors and scientists are raising warning flags over radiation this morning, and your kids could be facing a greater risk of exposure. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer was granted rare access inside a cell phone test lab.
You see them every day, everywhere. Kids on phones. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children are now exposed to an exponentially greater amount of radio frequency than any adult will ever be in a lifetime. Part of the problem, this isn't your mother's flip phone. Smartphones today have multiple antennas located inside the phone. When you talk, text, stream music, or videos, they emit non-iodizing radiation, similar to a low-powered microwave oven.
And it's the irregular, pulsed nature of the signal over thousands of minutes, over many years, that we believe can cause a great problem for children and for the rest of us as well.
Cell phone providers say they follow all safety guidelines put into place by the FCC. Those cell phone companies then work with labs like this one to test your device. The current FCC safety standard was developed nearly 20 years ago. The test at Sedicom in Milpitas, California, starts by taping a phone to the ear of a plastic head. The size of a 200-pound man, it's filled with liquid. The fluids used in these tests best replicate the same properties inside the human head. Scientists are then able to determine how much radiation penetrates the head when you're talking on the phone. The robotic arm precisely moves to various hotspots on the head to test the specific absorption rate. The phone we tested was within the FCC allowed radiation limit, but critics say these standards are outdated and urge the federal agency to adopt stricter radiation guidelines. Current FCC standards do not account for the unique vulnerability and use patterns specific to pregnant women and children, warns the American Academy of Pediatrics in a letter to the FCC.
Children are not little adults. The skull is thinner. Also, the volume of the brain is less compared to 200-plus size man.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office also asked the FCC to reassess the exposure limit, in particular the radiation limit when you have your cell phone close to your body, like in your pocket or when you hold it directly next to your head, or as some teens do, sleep with it on their pillow.
Phones are transmitting radiation so long as they're connected to the internet and connected to the Wi-Fi. And even if you're not talking on your phone is talking to the tower.
It's important that the World Health Organization has identified cell phone use as a potential cancer risk. And I agree with the conclusion. I think what really pertains here is the precautionary principle. The burden of proof is on the industry and on those who want to say there is no risk involved.
People need to be aware that there is this epidemiological data out there that's linking electromagnetic radiation and health effects.
So I think it's not unwise to take precautions, meaning, for example, instead of having the cell phone up against your ear, you could have a microphone that's distant, such as on a cord. You can talk into the microphone. You could have an earphone.
Of course, the big worry is that children are now using mobile phones extensively, and that was never the case before. So we're now looking for the first time at lifelong exposure, decades of exposure.
iPhones, iPads, Samsung Galaxy, Surface Pros. It doesn't matter where you go nowadays, mobile devices are within close reach. Perhaps too close. Dr. Deborah Davis is an expert on mobile phone radiation. She's also a leading authority on cancer, and there's a reason she uses an old-school handset.
What we know is that microwave radiation can have biological effects. Mobile phones damage sperm. Mobile phones with animals that are exposed during pregnancy cause them to have offspring with smaller brains, smaller testes, and hyperactivity. Those results in animals are very worrisome, and we would be foolish to think that we will be exempt from having those same experiences ourselves.
In 2011, the World Health Organization classified mobile phone radiation as a possible human carcinogen, grouping them in the same category as DDT and lead. But recently, Dr. Davis and her colleagues took the research a worrying step further.
There's no doubt in my mind that chronic mobile use increases the risk of brain cancer and other cancers too. A cancer of the cheek called parotid gland malignancy, probably even leukemia. You would not give lead or engine exhaust to children as something to play with. You wouldn't want them to be around it. I find it unconscionable that we are now exposing young children to mobile phone radiation.
More Australian children are being diagnosed with cancer than ever before. Our childhood cancer rate has risen 1.2% a year in the decade to 2015. The rate is projected to jump another 7% by 2037. Cancer researchers say the reasons for the spike are a mystery. Recent childhood cancer rate increases have also been reported in Asia and North America.
Maybe you've heard about exciting new 5G technology that promises to make our connections to the internet and all of the things connected to the internet faster and better than ever. Like other cell phone technology, 5G emits radiation. Two federal agencies recently said the available scientific evidence does not support the idea that 5G emits enough radiation to hurt people. But some scientists disagree. At first, the concern sounded far-fetched. We were surprised by what we learned. Is it your feeling that mobile phone use and 5G in the future have been and are causes of chronic disease epidemics in this country?
I believe that the exposures we already have are producing major effects already on our health, and that 5G will be vastly worse than anything that we are already exposed to.
At least 3 expert medical groups have linked certain kinds of electromagnetic fields, or EMFs, to cancer, particularly childhood leukemia. The U.S. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, a working group under the World Health Organization, and a European scientific committee, which studied cell phones in particular. Paul says there's more to worry about.
What's been shown is you get depression, I can't sleep, I'm tired all the time, I'm depressed, I've got headaches, I can't concentrate, I'm anxious. All the things that everybody complains about now, we know are caused by EMF exposures. And not just one type, but multiple types of EMF exposures.
The concerns are shared by citizens and scientists around the world.
These antennas are being installed without our permission, without any warning at all. Many of us do not want to be guinea pigs in this experiment, but we apparently have no say in the matter.
5G fifth generation technology promises faster download speeds and conveniences that most of us have never dreamed of, but will also be blanketed with a new type of radiation called millimetre waves. Health experts are warning about the rising risks with a 5G rollout.
It's not been made clear to the public that 5G won't just be another number and letter on your cell phone. It requires an entirely new infrastructure of thousands of small cellular antennas to be erected throughout cities where it's going to be installed.
What would 5G infrastructure look like? Small cell antennas could be placed as close as every third hydro pole. Scientists from 42 countries are now warning their governments about the emerging health problems associated with wireless radiation, and Canadian doctors and scientists have added their voices.
The most prevalent symptoms include headache, fatigue, decreased ability to concentrate, tinnitus, irritability, and insomnia. Impacts on the heart and the nervous system are also of great concern.
Dr. Magda Havas is internationally recognized for her research on the biological effects of electromagnetic pollution. She said that at high intensities, these waves cause intense heat and pain because sweat glands on the surface of our skin act like mini antennas.
At lower frequencies, scientists are predicting damage to eyes, loss of insect populations which are already declining, antibiotic resistance in bacteria, and physiological effects on the nervous system and on the immune system.
One advisor to the World Health Organization said there's enough evidence that if they were to re-evaluate radiofrequency radiation,
it would be placed in class 1, i.e. a human carcinogen, and governments could not possibly ignore that.
Progress or a nuisance? Tonight, the Montgomery County Council debated a new proposal to build new 5G cell towers near people's homes. People who opposed the idea staged a protest before the meeting. They said the cell towers could harm people's health and the environment, and they will damage the look of some communities.
There are studies which show that when you have a big cell tower or something like that in front of your house, the property value decreases. Folks are worried about health issues related to the radio frequency radiation.
I'm going to be demanding answers and studies before we see hundreds of thousands, literally more than 300,000 will be necessary at a minimum across the country of these new transmitters with antennas. They'll be smaller, but the radio frequency will be higher.
Okay, so this is Park Ritchie. There are something like 33 antennas on top of the building and on the facade of the building.
Verizon owns 12 of them and wants to upgrade, according to this permit application to the Montgomery County Department of Technology Services. But that's where the trouble starts, because right here in the application, under a section called Worst Case Predictive Modeling, it says there are areas up on the roof where the maximum power density generated by the Verizon antennas is approximately 2,598% of the FCC's general public limit. Translation, that's more than 25 times what the FCC says is safe exposure for the general public on a building where hundreds of people live, some just a few feet below the antennas. And it's 5 times higher than the FCC's limit for exposure to workers. Building residents I spoke to were unaware of the report, but neighbors concerned about wireless development in the area are worried.
Just think of those folks living in those top floors.
What is the point of being a nuclear-free zone if you've got radiation coming off the top of an apartment building?
So they're going to find out more details about the actual exposure levels for folks who are on those top floors.
As a result of all of this, Tacoma Park City Council sent a letter to county regulators calling the information.
My story is that I was diagnosed with a stage 3 tumor in my left leg. After much research, I learned that it very likely was caused by my laptop, which I kept on my left leg for hours upon hours at a time. It affected me in many ways as a runner. And then as a result of the information that I found, I learned that it is not only the laptops, it is the mobile devices. And my mission is to create awareness so that this doesn't happen to anyone ever again. But it's simple. It's just about being smart. It's just about being smart. Don't put your phone in your bra. I put it on, if I'm going to use my cell phone, I put it on speakerphone. Are there times where you can't hear it? Yeah, of course. And of course, there are times, of course, I use it the way you're not supposed to, up against your head. but it's not that hard. If I know that, as I said, if I'm going to wear it in my armband, you know, if I'm at the gym, I put it in airplane mode. It's simple. Airplane mode. It's that easy. Or turn it off. So it's really not that hard. It's just a slide of the device. And if people don't believe me, all they have to do is they can look at the legal disclaimer, which is online for their cell phone. It's fairly easy to find this information. Well, no, I'm sorry. It's not that easy. It's pretty elusive, actually. I apologize. I take that back. It's not easy to find this information. I had to dig deep. I had to dig really deep and really scroll through all of the information in the owner's manual for my laptop, where I found on page 11, keep this 8 inches away from your body. So if absolutely nothing else, that parents will protect their children. That is my goal. I do not want children to be exposed to this. They trust us. They rely on us. So my goal is that whether it's in life or death, that my story will inspire others to spread the word and not be afraid that people are going to think they're crazy. My goal is that even after I'm gone, I want people to know my story. I want people to know Susie's story too, because I promised her I'd keep it going. Never give up, never ever give up, never back down. And, you know, as I said early on, my motto is I won't.
We have to go fast.
The company is deeply tied not only to China, but to the Chinese Communist Party. The existence of those connections puts American information that crosses those networks at risk.
Well, I do think that this.
Let me begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive. Let me ask you first, and I'd like to just go down the row, whether each of you believes that nicotine is not addictive. I heard virtually all of you touch on it, and just yes or no. Do you believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe nicotine is not addictive, yes.
Mr. Johnston.
Congressman, cigarettes and nicotine clearly do not meet the classic definitions of addiction. There is no intoxication.
We'll take that as a no, and again, time is short. If you could just, I think each of you believe nicotine is not addictive.
There are more mobile phones than people in Australia, now a necessity for both the public and the government. Mobiles pump $6.5 billion a year into the economy. Many of us grew up with that niggling doubt about the heat of the phone from those half-hour calls. But life goes on. And let's be clear, the World Health Organization, the US Federal Drugs Administration and Europe's top scientific committee all agree that the weight of scientific evidence does not link mobile phones with any major health problems, and that this machine is benign and safe. So why then are some governments warning their citizens and some Australian scientists urging we take precaution, particularly around children? It's all happened in just the last 12 months. Two very different Australian voices have questioned the orthodox view. Epidemiologist Professor Bruce Armstrong has broken ranks on the world's largest research study. And top neurosurgeon Dr. Vinny Khurana has this week published his research review. Both find an increased risk of brain tumours on the side of the head the mobile is used after 10 years of calls, reflecting growing concerns around the world.
When it comes to proof of human harm, we've kind of been led down a garden path that says the only proof that really counts is enough sick or dead people. And I think that approach has got to change, and particularly with respect to something like brain cancer. Brain cancer can take 10, 20, or 30 years to develop. It may affect people 30, 40 years after they've been exposed. Our children today are using cell phones in growing numbers. They're marketing cell phones now to 5-year-olds.
Okay, Keely, let's get this started.
The country's major research centre into any possible link is the Australian Centre for RF Bioeffects Research, run by Rodney Croft.
Should we be worried about this?
No, there really has been a lot of research done to date, and the research has very clearly shown that there aren't any effects. With children, I really don't think that there is any evidence suggesting that this might be a problem. There isn't anything to suggest that we may have to be a little bit more cautious.
The ACRBR boasts some of our most experienced scientists, but as we'll see, it also has strong links with the industry. In New York, Louis Slessin runs Microwave News, which has tracked the mobile story for over 20 years. He's become highly critical of those he sees downplaying a link to cancer.
The people who are not inside, the insiders, if you will, are much more willing to speak out and say, we've got to be careful. The resistance comes from the people in the field, the so-called expert groups, those who make their bread and butter out of this, and they're saying, no, there's nothing to worry about, which is what they've been saying for 20 years.
Last month, a survey found over a third of British children had a mobile at 8 years old. It was 10 years ago that a British documentary raised concerns about children and mobiles.
How many of you have got a mobile phone? Quite a few of you. I would think possibly about half of you.
10 years on, what more do we know? The research that was supposed to answer this question was Interphone, a huge $15 million population study. 13 different countries, including Australia, compared thousands of tumour cases with healthy people and their use of mobiles. Interphone completed in 2006, but the conclusions have never been published. Insiders tell Lateline that the scientists can't agree on the results and have refused to talk to the media.
The fact that Interphone has not come out yet is a scandal.
What has come out are some results for individual countries, particularly Northern Europeans. So far, for people using mobiles for less than 10 years, there's no increased risk of gliomas, the killer brain tumour. That's the message that the industry wants the public to hear. Chris Althouse runs the industry's peak body.
Having looked at the results of Interphone and having looked at the studies that have been longer than Interphone, there's a Danish study that's 2 decades long. There is no medical, no biological or statistical substantiation of a adverse health outcome between brain and mobile phone use.
But the Interphone study tells a different story for people using mobiles for 10 years or more.
It's been a couple of years now that we have data from the Interphone project that indicates that we have a potential problem.
Now, interestingly,
late last year in Melbourne, the scientist running Australia's Interphone study spoke out. Bruce Armstrong declined an interview with Lateline, citing Interphone sensitivities, but his opinion is now on the public record from the keynote speech he made at Rodney Croft's ACRBR conference, streamed on the internet.
So, conclusions 3. Relative risk of glioma.
Professor Armstrong's conclusions, if correct, are an industry nightmare. For long-term users, suggestions of an increased risk of glioma, the deadly tumour, on the same side of the brain that a mobile is usually used. Enough to be a cause for concern, and that we should limit exposure, especially for children, to as low as reasonably achievable.
Certainly in terms of the research that Professor Armstrong is talking about, I certainly do not believe that it is as strong as what he would think.
Armstrong says, be cautious. ACBR, which has all these connections to the industry, is saying, oh, listen, don't worry, be happy, if you will. He's the keynoter. He's the guy who's putting it all together. So he's not really an outsider. He's just not a member of the club. He is, certainly a card-carrying member of the epidemiology. I mean, he's a world-class epidemiologist.
The Interphone data has been widely criticised for inaccuracies. After all, can you remember the number of calls and how long you spent on the phone, say, 4 years ago? But the link of tumours to the side of the head a mobile is used relies only on people remembering which side that was.
Well, there are many difficulties with this kind of research, trying to determine what side of the phone, what side of the head, for instance, someone uses their phone on, particularly after they've been diagnosed with a brain tumour.
Is that really that difficult, though? I mean, how many minutes you might have been on a phone might be difficult. But most people remember what side of the phone they've used over the years.
You would think so. Someone actually tested this recently to see how difficult it was. And There was very little correlation between the side that they actually used and the side that they reported.
Why is that though? Because certainly the research that Professor Armstrong has done on this supports the view that there isn't recall bias in this particular area. So what was the piece of research that you're talking about?
I would have to find that for you.
When Lateline asked to see the research showing people couldn't remember the side they used the mobile, Rodney Croft admitted to some difficulties. The research was not yet published, but he says the conclusions drawn by Armstrong are wrong.
We're looking at about 50 cases across the entire world. So far, all that's been reported in the literature is 23 cases.
Bruce Armstrong's findings now sit neatly alongside independent research from a scientist here in Sweden. Lennart Hardell has been talking of a link between the side of the head and gliomas since the late 1990s. Again, sample groups are small, but in the same month that Armstrong spoke out, Hardell presented his latest research at the Royal Society in London.
What is actually worrying us more now is recent analysis of our data, where we find that the risk for glioma and acoustic nevronoma is highest among those persons who have started their use of the mobile phone or cordless phone before the age of 20.
Dr. Hardell found that for people who started to use cell phones as teenagers, by the time they were in their late 20s, they had 4 to 5 times more malignant tumors of the brain.
Professor Armstrong acknowledged he was now delivering the same message about side of head as Hardell, who the industry largely ignores, and that he too would be downplayed.
Will everyone go away tonight and say, well, that stuff about side of the brain and use of mobile phone, that's interesting, but I don't think it can be real.
He's basically changed the conversation. He's saying we can't accept these denials that there's nothing there anymore. I think this is a watershed moment.
Other research by the ACRBR itself has found the power of a mobile does affect the brain.
We've been exploring effects of mobile phones on very subtle changes to brain function. We have been finding reliable changes in a particular frequency of brain activity called the alpha rhythm.
Why is it such a leap of faith to think that if there is a biological change, that there might not possibly be a health impact?
I think one of the reasons is that the only known mechanism for interaction is heating. But we must remember that it's also possible that holding a block of wood to your head, which is going to increase the temperature by more than the radio frequencies, could cause a problem.
We don't understand the mechanism, but Croft himself has shown it does do something in there. I find it so interesting that people find effects which could lead them to a breakthrough in terms of understanding basic science, and they say, oh, listen, don't pay attention, it doesn't matter, it's a subtle thing, throw it out. That's completely unscientific.
Bad Science was behind a YouTube clip in March last year, which got 4 million hits in its first week. It looks like radio waves from the 4 mobiles are strong enough to cook popcorn.
Just like to introduce Mike Wood from Telstra.
At the ACRBR's conference, Telstra was on board. It was easy to expose the popcorn hoax.
I think we have enough phones on the table to successfully prove that at the moment these phones are not cooking the popcorn.
Not so easy is explaining close ties with the industry. The ACRBR was created with Telstra funding and Telstra lab equipment. Rodney Croft denies that the industry buys influence.
You have Telstra researchers working through the ACRBR. Your board consists of at least one director who's a Telstra board member, who's a former chief government scientist and a former head of the CSIRO. Can you see the potential for some heavy influence there?
It would still be very difficult. I mean, you really have a board of 6 that make the scientific decisions. Money going into this research comes from a levy on industry, but it goes to government. Government sends it to National Health and Medical Research Council of Australia. They then have independent groups to decide what research is important.
Telstra declined an interview with Lateline, leaving the industry peak body to speak on its behalf.
It's for the scientists to use funds to investigate these subjects. They are very expert at doing so. It's a very complex area. So this industry is responsibly contributing, but in no way influences the outcome of the research.
What's inside his brain?
What's inside his brain? Well, all kinds of brain cells. That's why you can think and be so smart.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Epidemiologist Deborah Davis says industry research has shown that the radiation penetrates the brain of a child far more deeply than an adult.
Should we insist we won't act until we have proof of enough sick or dead kids before acting? I don't think so, and neither does the European Parliament.
In September, the European Parliament voted 522 to 16 to recommend tighter safety standards for mobiles. 5 countries have now warned their citizens about the possible dangers of mobile phones around children. Even Finland, where Nokia makes up a third of the stock exchange. There are other players sounding the alarm. In Canberra, neurosurgeon Dr. Vinnie Khurana deals with tumours day to day. In March last year, he made headlines with his review of research. He found that 10 years of mobile use doubles the risk of brain cancer on the same side of the head the mobile is used. He later appeared on Larry King in the US.
Just because we don't know the mechanism or the link between, at a molecular level, between how cell phones may generate the milieu at a molecular level that results in a brain tumour, does not mean that there is no mechanism. There's no known mechanism, but not necessarily no mechanism. And I'd like to point you to the long-term data that's coming out of the Interphone studies.
What's your reaction to Vinnie Khurana's research paper from last year?
Look, I really don't think it's a good research paper scientifically. There are many limitations with that, and I don't think that the conclusions that he reached make any sense.
If that paper was peer-reviewed favourably by respectable scientists, would you change your view?
By respectable scientists, yes. There are certainly different levels of peer review.
Just this week, a peer review of Dr. Khurana's research has been published in the international journal Surgical Neurology. Co-authors include Lennart Hardell and high-profile neurosurgeon Charlie Teo. Dr. Teo was asked recently if mobiles had anything to do with the onset of brain tumours.
In my view, yes, but not scientifically, no. I think the scariest thing is that we know that when you give radiation for cancer to the brain, you can develop brain cancer from the radiation. So we know that. We know that radiation causes cancer. But it takes about 10 years for it to develop.
Elsewhere in the world, eminent scientists have taken very public stands. Last September, the head of Pittsburgh University's Cancer Centre put out a memo to 3,000 staff warning them about mobiles. And in France last June, 20 top health professionals used a newspaper to lobby the government. They were not epidemiologists, but the campaign drew out a clear comment from the then head of the very guarded Interphone group, Elizabeth Cardis.
When that statement came out in the French press saying we should be careful, she endorsed it too. Now, is there anybody more central to this than Elizabeth Cardis?
So what does the Australian government make of all this?
There's no real evidence, no convincing evidence that there's any adverse effects from mobile phone exposure. We don't receive here a lot of expressed concerns about mobile phones, and I think this is because people can take control. It's up to them how they use that phone.
For those anxious, the department website advises shorter calls and using a hands-free and a mobile without a built-in antenna. But the website description of Interphone research had a curious omission. It said for prolonged mobile use, there were reports of a small association with the benign tumour, acoustic neuroma, but did not mention the nasty one, glioma.
That is an omission if it doesn't. Certainly in our briefings and that, we keep the government and the ministers up to date with the latest findings from Interphone.
After Lateline pointed out the omission, the website was updated. Besides what the public can do, changes could also be made to the radiation level coming out of a mobile phone called the SAR. SAR levels are often buried on company websites, but the industry is required to keep the SAR below 2 watts a kilo. Yet if mobile phones are causing brain tumours, they're causing them at this level of exposure. I'm a high user, and the ABC Mobile that's been given to me has a SAR of at least twice many others on the market. I asked the industry peak body if it was worried that making SAR levels more prominent might be admitting a problem.
No, because there isn't a problem. We go back to the whole rationale around an SAR reading, and of course, again, it comes back to standards that have been set with large safety margins.
For Devra Davis, as long as industry holds the purse strings, its influence on research will continue.
And I think the motto for how to do this comes from the movie Thank You for Smoking. Thank You for Smoking was all about how you lobby to promote products that are, shall we say, a little questionable, products like tobacco and alcohol and guns.
And me?
At the end of the movie, the newest recruit is the mobile phone industry.
Look, gentlemen, practice these words in front of the mirror. Although we are constantly exploring the subject, currently there is no direct evidence that links cell phone usage to brain cancer.
And what we know is that there's no medical, biological or statistical evidence of any adverse health outcome from the use of a mobile phone. But that's not sufficient to just rule a line on research. 10 years and beyond are now a new dimension of research, and industry supports that approach.
Yet in reality, there's little effort into new research. The US National Research Council has called for large population studies into the future, and others for long-term high users, which is a lot of us these days.
Do you think this research should be done urgently?
Well, I wouldn't say urgently. I really think it's more a matter of following up some of the reports out there which don't seem to fit in to our understanding of science.
Here's the killer. There is not a single study on cell phone radiation going on in the United States today. Nothing. There's a big study in the wings, but it hasn't started yet. But if that gets underway, we'll have one study. That's it. Now, with 4 billion people...
Dave Gelati, I'm the president of the LA County Firefighters Union, Local 1014. But more importantly, realize I'm also a 25-year veteran fire captain. I've been a paramedic and engineer. I work at Fire Station 16, where outside of my kitchen window I can now throw a stone to a 70-foot tower that is closer to the 2-story apartment building with some of the low-income kids that we mentor at our station who've not had a voice in this. And I stand allied with not only the residents that we serve at my fire station, but with community members who are here today. And I want to cut to it. I have never felt like going out and buying a pack of cigarettes more than right now and getting my smoke on, because everything's going to just be okay, isn't it? There is no scientific data correlating smoking of cigarettes and cancer. Wait, there is no scientific data correlating cancer and firefighters going into smoke-filled environments. I've been through Senate and Assembly hearings making testimony to this fact, only to hear things like that brought up like we heard here today. It's ridiculous. This is a 20-year-old standard they're recurringly going back to, which is not even a safety standard. There's no health and safety people involved in this FCC standard. It's 20 years old, people. It's time to get current. Also, this is about transparency and accountability. This is the same LA RICS board that couldn't get through a bid process twice, has been through all kinds of mire and chaos, and they're asking you to allow them to enter into an agreement where the acting interim CEO can make decisions for you. I wouldn't want to turn over my power as a Board of Supervisor representing my constituents to anybody at this point other than yourselves, and represent the people in your districts. And last time I checked, firefighters weighing in, who dorm and live, we are not transient employees at the fire stations. When did we stop mattering as far as input goes from people and as stakeholders for what the impact is going to be of these towers? I don't understand when that happened. So I think the citizens are here to be with us, but we're here as usual to be with them. This is quite simple. Slow down, halt. Let's unify, bring all of the LMR and LT issues together, bring the cities back in. Let's go chase new grant monies. And by the way, talk about bite off your nose to spite your face. If we're going to go back and fight to keep these T-band channels, One of the easiest ways to say we give is to move on over to broadband right now, which is data and video and not voice communications, and say we give. And I read to you from the GAO's report on this. For mission-critical voice communications, public safety entities will likely continue to rely on their LMR systems for many, many years. Don't buy off on bait and switch. Please be supportive of the amendments to this motion.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Let me also call.
My name is Frank Lima, and I'm the president of United Firefighters of Los Angeles City, also a 24-year veteran and captain with the LA City Fire Department. And I'm here to clarify Mr. Malon from LA Rick's comments in that UFLAC has written multiple letters in opposition to the Public Safety Chairman Mitchell Englander, Mayor Garcetti, and Council President Herb Wesson. And we continue to be opposed to this project, and that is why we are here in support with our brothers and sisters from Local 1014. We are not comfortable that the project included a CEQA waiver. CEQA exists for a reason, and this project should have been subject to our state's environmental regulations. I want to be clear once again that UFLAC supports Local 1014, opposes the LA Ricks putting poles up where we live and spend 1/3 of our lives at the firehouses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Greetings, Bill Nye here. There's so much talk about what 5G might become, but not a lot of understanding about what it actually is. Learn more about T-Mobile's nationwide 5G.
This evening is raising a lot of questions about a link between cell phones and cancer. KPIX5's Andrea Borba breaks it all down for us.
It's the latest wake-up call about cell phone use, the largest federal study to date of the health risks of cell phone radiation. It found increased incidences of 11 different types of tumors in rodents exposed to levels of cell phone radiation that meet or exceed federal guidelines. Dr. Joel Moskowitz of UC Berkeley says even though they're just mice and rats, it's significant.
They almost always use mice and rats because they predict very well the effects on humans. The two types of tumors that were most commonly seen in the male rats are also the two types of tumors that we're seeing increased incidence in controlled studies of humans.
Something the authors of the study acknowledge, though they do warn the findings should not be directly extrapolated to human cell phone usage. And the American Cancer Society has contended the evidence for an association between cell phone and cancer is weak.
I think they are engaging in problem minimization to some extent.
Meanwhile, wireless safety advocates like Moskowitz take the report as yet another signal not to get too close to your cell phone.
Use speakerphone, text, keep the cell phone away from your head. Don't store the cell phone directly on your body if it's turned on.
He also advises not using your phone when the connection is poor, and don't make calls while driving.
When you're moving about, the cell phone is constantly searching for new cell towers, and so it's putting out more radiation.
It's advice that could make you a less distracted driver as well. Andrea Borba, KPIX5.
Now, we should note this is a draft report. The final version will be released in March. The California Department of Public Health also advises limiting contact with your cell phone.
Τα παιδιά μας εκτίθενται καθημερινά σε ένα ηλεκτρονικό νέφος, το οποίο δημιουργείται από την ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi και άλλα παρόμοια. Η ακτινοβολία αυτή, σύμφωνα με τον Παγκόσμιο Οργανισμό Υγείας, είναι πιθανώς καρκινογόνα για τον άνθρωπο. Σύμφωνα με νεότερες έρευνες, η ακτινοβολία αυτή είναι πιθανό να προκαλέσει και άλλες σοβαρές επιδράσεις στην ανάπτυξη και λειτουργία του εγκεφάλου, του αναπαραγωγικού και άλλων συστημάτων του εμβρίου και του παιδιού, να προκαλέσει καταστροφή των νευρικών κυττάρων και του DNA, διάσπαση της προσοχής, διαταραχές στη μάθηση και άλλες νευρολογικές παθήσεις. Τα παιδιά είναι πολύ ευάλωτα. Μπορούμε όμως σε σημαντικό βαθμό να τα προφυλάξουμε από ένα σοβαρό κίνδυνο. Φτάνει να μάθουμε πώς.
Αφού μας αγαπάτε, γιατί μας ακτινοβολείτε με τα Wi-Fi και τα κινητά σας τηλέφωνα? Έχουμε δικαίωμα στην υγεία και πρώτοι εσείς μπορείτε και πρέπει να μας προφυλάξετε.
Στη βάση της αρχής της προφύλαξης, το Συμβούλιο της Ευρώπης, το Ευρωκοινοβούλιο, επιστήμονες, ιατρικοί και εκπαιδευτικοί σύλλογοι στην Ευρώπη συμβουλεύουν ότι θα πρέπει να μειωθεί η έκθεση των παιδιών στην ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi, ιδίως στο σπίτι και στο σχολείο.
Η έκθεση των παιδιών σε ηλεκτρονικό νέφος εγκυμονεί κινδύνους. Η χρήση των κινητών και συσκευών Wi-Fi από παιδιά μικρότερα των 14 ετών πρέπει να αποφεύγεται. Προφυλάξτε την υγεία και το μέλλον των παιδιών σας. Το ίδιο ισχύει και για την έγκυο. Οι έφηβοι ποτέ δεν βάζουν το κινητό στο υπνοδωμάτιο τους, στις τσέπες τους, στα μπράτσα ή κοντά στο στήθος τους. Πάντα χρησιμοποιούν hands-free και κρατούν το κινητό μακριά από το σώμα τους.
Αξιοποιώ την τεχνολογία σωστά. Γνωρίζω τους κινδύνους και δεν εξαρτώμαι από αυτή. Χρησιμοποιώ ενσύρματη σύνδεση για τον υπολογιστή του σπιτιού μου και ενεργοποιώ το Wi-Fi και τα δεδομένα κινητής τηλεφωνίας μόνο όταν χρειάζεται και ποτέ όταν τα παιδιά μου είναι κοντά. Δεν χρησιμοποιώ κινητό τηλέφωνο στο αυτοκίνητο όταν τα παιδιά μου βρίσκονται σε αυτό. Η έκθεση στην ακτινοβολία είναι πολύ μεγαλύτερη. Προστατεύω πάντα τα παιδιά μου.
Η Γαλλία ήδη με νόμο απαγόρευσε τη χρήση Wi-Fi σε παιδικούς σταθμούς και σε χώρους όπου φιλοξενούνται παιδιά κάτω των 3 χρόνων. Επιτρέπει ελάχιστη χρήση στα σχολεία κάτω από αυστηρούς περιορισμούς.
Στον υπηαγωγείο, στο σχολείο και στο σπίτι περνάμε τουλάχιστον το 75% του χρόνου μας.
Απαιτούμε ασφάλεια, χωρίς ακτινοβολίες από Wi-Fi, κινητά και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις. Η υγεία είναι δικαίωμα. Μην μας το στερείτε.
Δεν έχουμε το δικαίωμα να ρισκάρουμε την υγεία των παιδιών μας αναμένοντας παθητικά τους άλλους να κάνουν κάτι. Ας ξεχάσουμε τι είναι βολικό για μας και ας τους χαρίσουμε το καλύτερο δώρο, την υγεία τους, μετατρέποντας το σπίτι και το σχολείο σε όαση προστασίας.
Το σπίτι μου είναι όαση αγάπης και ασφάλειας. Σβήνω τα Wi-Fi και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις όταν δεν χρησιμοποιούνται και κυρίως όταν τα παιδιά είναι στο σπίτι και τα κλείνω πάντοτε το βράδυ. Αξιοποιώ το κουμπάκι on-off. Είναι τόσο απλό να μειώσω το χρόνο αχρίαστης έκθεσης. Επενδύω στην υγεία των παιδιών μου μακροχρόνια.
Η ζωή και το μέλλον τους είναι στα δικά μας χέρια. Δώστε στα παιδιά ένα μοναδικό δώρο ζωής, την υγεία τους.
Normally, people wouldn't go to their own doctor out of a concern, well, I've been using a cell phone for 20 years.
West Des Moines attorney Bart Goplerud thinks Apple and Samsung should pay for some of their customers' next doctor's visit.
I think what we're going to find is that Apple and Samsung knew about the real-world use of cell phones, but did testing under different conditions.
Goplerud, along with attorneys from several other states, filed a lawsuit claiming Apple and Samsung misrepresent the safety risk posed to anyone who uses certain models of their phones. He points to studies from the National Toxicology Program, French National Frequencies Agency, and Chicago Tribune that all suggest cell phones could be emitting higher levels of what's called radio frequency or RF radiation than the FCC allows.
Exposure to RF radiation is a probable cancer cause. The emission is up to 500% greater than that allowed by the federal government.
The FCC requires companies to test their phones to make sure they are within federal limits, but Goplerud says companies are allowed to distance the phones up to 25 millimeters away from the body, nearly an inch.
However, there's very few people that actually hold a phone a certain distance from their ear instead of holding it to their head.
The American Cancer Society says while some studies have shown a possible link between cell phones and tumors, the majority did not find enough evidence. The FCC and FDA consider the risk small as well. Goplerud thinks Iowans and consumers deserve more information and is asking Samsung and Apple to pay for their customers to be checked.
So that they can go and be checked based upon their cell phone usage, currently or in the past, to see if there are any abnormalities that then would lead them to further care.
Alex Schumann, KCCI 8 News, Iowa's news leader.
So do you have a smartphone in your pocket or a wireless smart meter?
I strongly believe that radio frequency radiation is a human carcinogen.
More and more Canadians spend a lot of time with a cell phone seemingly glued to their heads. But how safe is that? In a moment, I'll be talking with a scientist about the link between our phone use and our health. But first, how much do we even know about what cell phone providers recommend for users? We hit the streets to ask people, where do they keep their cell phone?
I keep my cell phone in my pocket.
In my purse.
I keep it in my pocket.
Some people use a clip.
I keep it on my belt.
But most don't.
I just always keep it in my pocket, or I keep my briefcase or my suit jacket or whatnot. I don't really have one of those clips.
But have they read the fine print in the manuals that come with these phones?
No. Just you started using it, didn't have any time to actually read it.
Did they know that a lot of them carry strongly worded advice like this?
Went on so small.
When using an iPhone near your body for voice calls, keep it at least 5/8 of an inch away from your body.
The long-term effect of exceeding RF exposure standards might present a risk of serious harm. I'm shocked.
Always wear a rim-approved holster, and if not, maintain a distance of at least 0.98 of an inch from your body. Yep, the Motorola manual has the same advice.
Approved clip, eh? Or body harness. So 2.5 centimeters from your body when transmitting. So making a phone call, I have to keep it 2.5 centimeters. So I have to go like this when making a phone call. That doesn't make any sense. So if I want kids, I should keep my phone out over here.
Not on the phone, not on the box, but inside the manuals it says, keep your phone away from your body. Why? Are you safe if you don't? We tried to get to the bottom of what those precautions mean. We asked the makers of some of the top-selling smartphones. The safety information outlined in RIM's manuals corresponds with standards followed by Industry Canada. Apple told us iPhone's radio frequency energy is well within the limits set by Industry Canada. But are they safe if we hold them right next to our heads or wear them on our bodies? Industry Canada says that the testing standards are based on numerous scientific studies, and the devices must be tested with the accessories like a holster or clip if the manufacturer provides one. Still no answer to why we're told to hold them away from our bodies. So we take a look at those standards, and it turns out they're based on some assumptions. For example, the tests use a model called SAM. That stands for Standard Anthropomorphic Man.
I know I'm not average. I know I'm kind of short for my height, but that seems kind of ridiculous.
SAM is based on the size of top military recruits.
Doesn't make any sense because the average person is not 6'2", 200 pounds.
Percentage of Canadians 6'2" or over? 2%. Percentage of Canadians 200 pounds or more? 18.1%. And there are no tests on what cell phone radiation does to kids.
17.
I'm 17 tomorrow.
We're all 17. I don't blame the company. I blame the government for not making stringent regulations upon this that they have to actually follow.
No one gives us a clear answer on whether it's safe to hold it next to your body.
I'm actually going to keep my cell phone over here, and I'm not going to actually have it on my body. But yeah, it didn't make any sense to me. But yeah, I'll definitely see if I'm investing in a clip or something.
I feel like calling my daughter now. Don't put your phones in your pocket.
So those manuals are just one of the issues raised in a new book by Deborah Davis. She studies environmental effects, especially cancer risks. She's even shared a Nobel Prize with Al Gore. Her latest book reads like a conspiracy thriller, full of nasty plot lines. She accuses the cell phone industry of covering up the dangers. I met up with her in Washington and started with the cautions in those cell phone manuals. So what does that mean that this is in here?
It means that if you use the phone like that, you're not in compliance with the standards.
But why don't they put it on the phone? Who's going to read? Didn't even know this was in here.
Well, when I testified before the Senate, I called for warnings to be put on phones. Most people do not know that a cell phone is a small microwave radio. Most people do not know that microwave radiation at low doses over long periods of time has been linked to a variety of biological impacts and damage.
In fact, just this spring, headlines after a huge research project from the World Health Organization told us not to worry.
But what about the Interphone study?
Among the Interphone team of investigators from 13 countries, some of the people aren't talking to one another. There's a big disagreement in that group.
Davis says there are two big problems with the Interphone study. There's a conflict of interest because it was partly funded by the cell phone industry, and that most of the research doesn't look at heavy users, and the small parts that do found a doubling or even quadrupling of tumors.
So are you suggesting science is for sale?
It's more subtle than that. I'm suggesting that scientists always need research money. We do. And if you're getting paid very handsomely to do work, and you get to go to very nice places to present your findings, there's a kind of series of subtle incentives that are operating.
But enough to not find an effect, to say, no, there's no effect?
It is more complicated than that, frankly. But sometimes you can set up a study so that it's designed to fail.
In her book, Davis says when negative effects are found, the cell phone industry goes out of its way to hide it. It's something I've heard before in stories that I've done here at CBC. In 1994, in Seattle, Henry Lai, with his study on rats, was one of the first to report that cell phone-like radiation damages DNA, seen as a first hint of cancer. When his work was reported, his funding dried up.
In 3.5 years, nothing happened. You wonder what's going on.
A few years later, the head of the U.S. body that figures out how much cell phone radiation is acceptable reported a problem. When Om Gandhi published a report showing the brains of smaller adults and children absorb much more radiation than that big man Sam, his long and profitable ties with the defense and electronics industry came to an end. In Davis's book, Gandhi is quoted as saying, "Anytime there's evidence of an effect, there are many others brought in to show that there is nothing." Also in the mid-90s, the Canadian and American cell phone industry gave a Washington-based scientist named George Carlo $28 million for research. He spent years telling people not to worry, until the end, when he says his study started to show there was an effect.
When they found that we had findings of genetic damage and increase in the risk of cancer, they cut off our money completely.
Then, in 2002, Franz Edelkofer, who had been chief of research for the tobacco industry in Germany, was given millions of euros by the EU to test the hypothesis that cell phone exposure is safe. Edelkofer was shocked when results came back showing genetic damage that was 10 times more likely with the new, more powerful 3G phones. A few months later, Edelkofer was accused of fabricating his results. He's now battling what he calls an industry smear job. We reached him in Munich, Germany.
Mobile phone industry has taken over some methods used by the cigarette industry in the United States for many, many years to hide the truth.
You're suggesting a massive effort to make negative science go away.
It's not that hard. The first thing you do is you don't fund the science at all. It's really tough to do research. And there are lots of important questions we can study. So why would anybody in their right mind want to go into a field that's dangerous to get into?
But still, many do. Health Canada says the weight of evidence from animal, cell culture, and human studies does not indicate that the energy emitted by cell phones is strong enough to cause serious health effects. Well, what about cancer? We did our best to find all the lab studies done around the world in the last 2 years on whether there is any link to cancer. We found about 15. Almost half did not find any harmful effect, but a bit more than half did. Check this out. 2 studies from Italy and 1 each from China, Turkey, India, Austria, Croatia, Sweden, and Germany, all showing a biological effect from cell phone radiation.
So you're afraid this could be as bad as tobacco?
I think it could turn out to be worse than tobacco for one simple reason. We've never had a situation where all people smoked. Today, around the world, almost all people are using cell phones.
But cell phones have been around for a long time, and we're not seeing any big spike in brain tumors.
That's true, but cell phones have not been around for a long time with heavy use. In fact, 10 years ago, less than half of all Americans and Canadians used a cell phone at all. At all. Now, almost all of us do use them. If it takes 20 years for a risk to become evident in the population, if it takes 30 or 40 years, we won't have proof that cell phones are dangerous in the human population until I'm dead.
While there is no huge spike in tumors, there have been small increases reported.
We're seeing effects with hearing, we're seeing tumors on the hearing nerve, we're seeing tumors on the cheek, we're seeing tumors in the brain, right around the areas. And we're seeing tumors on the side of the head where people most often hold their phone.
And some of those results are from Davis herself. While director of the Cancer Institute at the University of Pittsburgh, she wrote a paper that showed a significant increase of brain tumors among Americans in their 20s. She says she was not given the funding to continue that work.
You're now writing this book. You used to be at a university. You're not there anymore. Have you been sidelined because of your speaking out on this?
I decided that it would be better for me to leave the university to work on this issue, that it would be better for me to do this work without the constraints that I faced as the director of the Center for Environmental Oncology at the University of Pittsburgh Cancer Institute.
Davis stepped down as director of that center last December. The university's strategic partnership with Verizon, the wireless company, continues to flourish. The university didn't want to talk to us about her departure either.
So no backlash against you? You haven't been made to suffer for speaking out on this? You talk about a massive lobby on this issue.
You'll have to talk to the university. I don't really have any other comment to provide at this time.
But she's not shutting up about cell phones.
Because I think this could become the most important public health threat of our generation. I'm a grandmother now. You know, I've been in science for more than 3 decades.
And this is just a simple illustration of the dose to the gonads and the bone marrow. And that is why, in fact, this is one of the secrets of cell phones. They are always tested in a holster. They are never tested in the pocket.
If phones were tested in pockets, they would exceed the as-tested exposure guidelines.
Dr. Davis, you said that a cell phone should not be kept any closer than an inch to your body. Is that what you said? I don't know where does that come from?
That actually comes from the BlackBerry manual as well as from the iPhone manual. If you read the manuals, which almost none of us does, that is what they say. So by calling for warning labels as I am simply calling to codify what the industry is currently telling us about cell phones. And I would also add that when I was privileged to work with Dr. Ronald Herbermann at the University of Pittsburgh Cancer Institute, he looked at the evidence on this issue as one of the world's most distinguished cancer biologists, and he concluded that it was appropriate to warn the staff to take these simple precautions, the same precautions that Israel is recommending, the same precautions that Finland, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden have recommended.
Okay, now let's face it, us men. Now my wife has a BlackBerry, she keeps it in her purse. It's fine. Mm-hmm. We all have these holsters, right? Every man, we all put them on our belts. Mm-hmm. Are you telling me that I should not wear a BlackBerry?
Well, actually,
that when millions of Americans put this phone up next to their ear, even if only for brief periods of time, there are millions of them that wonder whether or not they may be hurting their own health or their children's health. And when there are 110 million Americans are using cell phones, it doesn't take a very large error in terms of identification of adverse medical consequences to have an epidemic-size problem.
So the cell phone's here, is that right?
Correct.
Cell phone's here, and it's a very deep penetration, you're saying. Now, is this kind of penetration of the energy of a cell phone, the radio frequencies, radiation, we're saying, would you say that from looking at this visually, is it your testimony that most of the brain of a child would receive some of this energy? That's correct. Most of the brain, at least on that side of the head, would be absorbing that energy. And it's a simple explanation for it. One is that the skull is considerably thinner in a child, and it doesn't reach maturity until the 20s. In addition to that, the nerves in the brain in an adult are protected by a myelin sheath. In children, the myelin has not fully developed, so there's several reasons for the increased absorption in a child.
What are the considerations with respect to an additional potential risk for children using cell phones?
Children have a configuration of their skull that does allow penetration of cell phone radiation deeper.
Are you saying there's a potentially greater risk?
And in all of these, we're finding that levels can be quite high, much higher in the younger brain, which has more fluid and a softer skull. There's clearly a higher exposure. And even if the exposures were identical to the child and the adult is not just a little adult. Their brains are less myelinated, they're growing more rapidly, and they need more protection. That's why we put helmets on them. That's why we put them in special car seats until they reach a certain weight. Children need more protection than adults, and our standards do not take that into account.
You look at the DNA in the cells in the brain of this animal after exposure, and we found that the DNA, there's an increase in DNA breakage or DNA damage in these cells, these brain cells. So that's the, I guess it's very important finding, and at that time we were very puzzled by this effect because the radiation is very, very low, and but well, we consistently observe DNA damage. At that time, we did not know what happened, and actually there was an internal memo that leaked out from Motorola, and the memo basically tried to find some way to discredit our results.
As well as other members of the industry, I understand that someone contacted both NIH and perhaps someone else.
Children are proportionally more exposed to cell phone radiation than adults. This is the electrical field at 900 megahertz with two human models. One is a 34-year-old male, and the other is a 6-year-old child. This imaging shows how the field penetrates the skull and the brain. The colors represent the intensity of the field from white to yellow, orange, red, purple, and black. The animation is from slices put together and slowed down by 5 billion times. I am an electrical engineer professor, and this is a simulation using microwave industry standard software used to...
Tony, what are you thinking? I have an unbelievable story about cell phones, so everyone with a cell phone should pay attention, so everybody should pay attention. Right. I mean, owning these things is the greatest experiment that we're all engaged in without really thinking about it as an experiment. Yep. They give off something called radio frequency radiation, and the Chicago Tribune spent about a year investigating the effects of this, and what they did is they went to a lab that has liquid that mimics human tissue, and they took these phones, iPhone 7s, and they stuck them to the liquid, the tissue, and they found that the radiation measurement inside that tissue was twice the safe legal limit and double what Apple reports to the government and well above the legal limit, over the safety limit. And they tested 11 phones, found issues to varying degrees with all of them. Now, Apple disputes this and says, look, that's not how we test them. Right. But what's amazing here is that the standard test that the manufacturers have to undergo is based on the 1990s when everyone had a cell phone on their hip. On their hip, so there's a 1-inch leeway. They're allowed to, as opposed to here or in your pocket or next to your head all night when you're sleeping. Yep. So
Solution where earbuds,
Yeah, that is one solution.
things.
Don't put it in your pocket, and just be aware that the effects of close contact with this over the long term, many decades, basically cradle to grave, are not well understood yet. So,
as you point out, we are involved in a human experiment, the results of which are not yet known.
Yeah.
Exercise
'Cause every
caution.
time the cell phone industry does a test, they go, no problem, everything is great and fine.
And you know, cell phone industry
Yeah.
people are using cell phones too. This involves all of us.
Yeah.
So, caution.
Something to think about.
Have they been proved to be safe, Mr. Coleman?
I believe they have not been proved to be unsafe, because when, as and if, any ingredient in cigarette smoke is identified as being injurious to human health, we are confident that we can eliminate that ingredient. And I concluded from that report, it's true, the babies born from women who smoke are smaller, but they're just as healthy as the babies born from women who do not smoke.
What about the higher
And
rate
some
of
women would
deaths?
prefer having smaller babies.
What about